Welcome back, Roll fans. You're listening to another episode of the Rebel Talk presented by the Rebel Walk. I'm your host, Cam Wicker, and as always, I'm here with your other host,
Zach Morath.
And today we're going to talk a little Ole Miss football. A lot happening in Ole Miss football over the past month or so. A lot happening in Ole Miss sports in the past month or so, but we'll get to talk a little bit about baseball and maybe some other sports in the next podcast. But we really wanted to finish that back half, the predictions that we left y'all off with last time, and we'll get to that in the back half of this episode. And then we wanted to talk about in the beginning right now about just some of the decommits recently for football, some recent commits, and then the EA rankings that me and Zach have a few opinions about for the new college football game coming out later next month in July. But we'll go ahead and get it started off. Five decommits in the month of June for this Ole Miss team. 4 in the past week. You want to start off and talk about some of those guys, Zach?
Yeah, there were a couple. So right off the bat, I'll just name the most recent. Kylan running back, Dylan Alfred, wide receiver, Corey Amos, linebacker, and then Jerome Miles, another wide receiver. Jerome Miles, that was always an interesting one for me, Cam, because he committed on a visit, which is, it's not bad. Obviously, you'll take any sort of commitment, but on a visit, it's usually, you can infer that they're going to take other visits, and their recruiting process is nowhere close to being done. And the same thing happened with Corey Amos. Corey's from Louisiana. Jerome is from Utah. So who do they want to play for, right? And we can anticipate Jerome will probably end up at Utah at some point. I know he's visited there. I wouldn't be surprised if he committed there over the next year. And then Corey Amos, I put 2 and 2 together. I would assume he might end up at Baton Rouge as a Tiger. But Dylan Alfred and Kylan surprised me the most, Cam. Alfred's from Mississippi. He moved to Alabama to play high school football, but he's from Mississippi. He trains with Mike Espy, former Ole Miss Rebel. It just seemed like the timing and everything was perfect for him to, be in an Ole Miss uniform one day, but apparently not. I know Clemson's going after him hard, a bunch of other Power 5 schools. And then Kylan, one of the best running backs in the country. This one hurt. It seemed like he had a really good relationship with Kevin Smith, and then he took a visit to Alabama and everything changed. So not good by any means. But again, Jackson Dart, Princely Umanmielen, and Coach Kiffin all chimed in on Twitter. It's a good thing the transfer portal exists. So it's not a time to panic. Of course, there's probably 5 months more of high school recruiting to do, but definitely, an interesting scenario with just all these guys happening. And I think it was like a 1 to 2 day span, Cam, but we'll see.
Absolutely. Like you said, Ole Miss fans shouldn't panic. These are 2025 recruits. We're in 2024 right now. This next season is what Ole Miss is worried about right now. There's a dead period going on in recruiting right now. So expect Lane Kiffin to kind of, amp things back up when recruiting picks back up when the season starts. And, like you said, the portal's been the biggest addition for Kiffin, not demoting any of these high school guys, saying that they're not like the caliber of these transfer players, but this seems like what Kiffin's doing, moving towards more where he's going to pick up more transfer players more often than these high school players, because more often than not, you're going to have to rely on these high school players entering the transfer portal at some point in their college career.
Exactly, Cam. It's going to happen. And, if we're being honest, if a Kylan goes to Alabama and he doesn't play his freshman year, portal Ole Miss, you know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
Things will work themselves out. But obviously, you never want to lose 4 commits in a 2 or 3 day span. So
absolutely. And some of those guys that you said, like Jerome Miles, obviously has the Utah ties. I know he recently visited with A&M, and I think he's already visited or going to visit with Michigan. Kylan obviously has the Bama prediction. Sealing Clemson predictions for Dylan Alfred as well. I know he chose Ole Miss over Auburn. Like you said, plays a little bit of high school ball in Alabama as well. And then Corey Amos. I also know that he visited Tulane recently, which I wouldn't be surprised if you get a commitment from Tulane there. Obviously, that's a place where Corey Amos knows that he can go and probably play right away. And then obviously the other guy that rounded off the 5 decommits was Quentin Murphy, another 3-star athlete in that class that decommitted early in the month of June. Moving into the commitments for the Rebel recently, we'll go back to about a week ago to Andrew Maddox, Oak Grove, Mississippi. A.J. Maddox's little brother. He's a force to be reckoned with, top 25 defensive lineman in the country, number 7 player in the state of Mississippi. He has another big piece to the future young talent of this Ole Miss defensive line that they already added in this past class, Zach.
Yeah, he's a stud. I saw him play in the state championship, which Oak Grove won, him and his brother, which was super cool. But he's a guy you can put up in the interior on the defensive line. He can also edge rush. really versatile, really good size. And of course, I think his dad played with Pete Golding at some point in his career. So there's all sorts of connections, which is awesome, because it seems like Andrew's a guy you're probably not going to lose towards, the end of this recruiting cycle. But again, potential is through the roof, and kind of similar to Cam Franklin and Will Eccles. I think he's a guy who can come in here his freshman year and immediately start turning some heads, Cam.
Absolutely. He's a force to be reckoned with, like you said. I mean, just watching this film, he seems like he's a lot stronger than a lot of high school guys out there. He's really quick off the ball, which is great for a guy his size because he's always hand in the dirt. And he's really quick off the ball, always in the backfield during this film. And getting to join his brother on campus soon, so that'll be pretty fun for him to get to enjoy another future with his brother on a different team rather than in high school instead.
No, absolutely. Go ahead. Tell us about Corey Adams.
Oh, yeah, Corey Adams, 3-star from Edna Carr. He's defensive lineman, kind of plays like in that Jared Ivey role. I'd say kind of with his hand in the dirt. He'll stand up every now and then on the edge. But I didn't really get to watch a lot on him until today. He's a top 100 defensive lineman in the country. Comes from a pretty big school in South Louisiana, around the New Orleans area, Edna Carr. They pump out athletes all the time, not just in football. But Corey Adams seemed like a guy that's going to be very explosive, swatted down a lot of passes in his film. And it seemed like Ole Miss seems like they got another guy in that that Jared Ivey build where he can maybe add a few pounds to him. I think he's 250 pounds right now, but you get this guy up 270 pounds, and it seems like he can be pretty quick off the ball inside in the interior for Ole Miss in the future.
Absolutely, Cam. So despite the decommitments, I think that's a great foundation for Pete Golding just to continue to establish these defensive linemen and keep them intact with Ole Miss. So that's great.
Absolutely. I think that's all we got for you guys on recruiting right now. We'll hop into a little bit of these EA college football rankings. The game comes out, I believe, the 15th or the 16th for the early release, and the actual date, the 18th or the 19th. Can't remember the exact dates there, but coming up in a month here, you'll be able to play with your favorite college football team. For a lot of you, those watching, that'll probably be Ole Miss. But we'll talk about these rankings for Ole Miss that came out in this past week for EA. A little bit of surprise here for Ole Miss fans, if I'd say so myself, Zach. 13th ranked offense in the game, 87 overall. That was below Colorado, Penn State, Utah, Clemson, and Miami. And my pause there at Colorado this is a 4-8 Colorado team we put over Ole Miss in this game. No downfall here. No, I'm not taking any shots at this Colorado team or the fan base or anything. But this is an offensive line that was statistically the worst in college football last year. They let up the most sacks in college football last year. Didn't really protect Shedeur Sanders that well. And not really great on defense either. And they had a top 25 defense in this game as well. Rankings aren't everything. They're going to change, obviously. But like I said, Ole Miss was ranked below Penn State. They beat Penn State in a bowl game. Penn State doesn't have the greatest offense either. Clemson didn't have the greatest offense last year. And, I mean, the top 25 defense, Ole Miss last year, yes, wasn't the greatest defense. But if we're going off the team this year, which is going to be in the game that you're going to be playing with, Ole Miss for sure has a top 25 defense talent-wise, no doubt.
It's not even disputable. I'm trying to figure – I can't even, process it in my head who made this. I'm super confused, Cam. It's very clear there's a bone to pick with Ole Miss because if you watch any of the trailers – I don't know if Ole Miss is seen once. So something's happening. I'm not sure what it is, but if it's going to provide us some motivation, a little bit of extra motivation, I guess that's fine. But again, I don't understand how in the world they came up with this, dude.
Absolutely. Ole Miss players definitely shouldn't work themselves up over this. Is a video game. This is something that's not real. But obviously in this game, the rankings will change as the season goes, just like they do in the Madden games where they change the ratings of the team as the season goes along. But for the overall rankings, I think they came out with that yesterday. Ole Miss was 88. Doesn't really add up there, I guess, if you count their 87 overall offense and below 84 defense. So I don't know how they got that there, but that was also 15th in the game below Clemson, Notre Dame, LSU, Penn State, Utah, and Miami, just one spot above Colorado in the game. So right off the bat, Ole Miss probably won't be the best team to play with in the game if you're looking to beat some of the teams like Georgia and Ohio State, but definitely going to still buy the game. I haven't played it in years, and it's definitely something I'm looking forward to. But when I saw this news earlier this week, it was definitely something that what I wasn't pleased about, and I'm sure a lot of other Ole Miss fans were not pleased about at all.
Yeah, it makes zero sense. It's not logical, but I will be playing the game. So
no doubt, no doubt. I think that's all we got for you guys for this first half of the podcast. When we come back after this short commercial break, we'll get into the predictions for the second half of the Ole Miss football season. Welcome back, guys. And I believe last time we were with you guys, we left you off at the Kentucky game. Well, not the Kentucky game. Was it South Carolina, I believe? Was that last game we left them off at?
Yeah, we talked about South Carolina.
Yeah, so we'll hop into week 7 at LSU. They're heading down to Baton Rouge. Like we said, I believe we talked about it in that South Carolina, when we were talking about South Carolina at the end of that podcast. It's going to be a tough matchup in South Carolina, and you got to not look forward to that Baton Rouge matchup the next week. And I believe Baton Rouge is a make-or-break game for Ole Miss. This is a game early in the season that really, if you lose it, kind of ruins your chances to be an SEC championship team. I mean, this is a conference with no divisions anymore. There's no East versus West anymore. It's just top 2 teams. And if you lose a game to LSU early in the season, there's chances down the road you may lose to Oklahoma, you may lose to Georgia, and there's no chance of getting in an SEC championship game. Now, if you lose to LSU, does that ruin your chances of getting in the college football playoff spot? Probably not. You still can win out. You still can maybe lose one more and get in the college football playoff spot. Like I said, top 12 teams, you can still get in. But this is going to be a very tough matchup for Ole Miss on the road in Baton Rouge. We know anything's possible in Baton Rouge. I believe this probably is slated as a night game. I think they had it slated as a night game already.
Yep.
So this is probably an LSU team that could be undefeated when they come into this game. They could have one loss coming in this game. I think they play like Auburn or something like that when they come in. And I know they play USC. They play USC early. Yeah, and they play UCLA. That's right. They play USC and UCLA early in the season. So I know they've lost to UCLA in the past early in the season. So who knows what happens to LSU early in the year. But like I said, night game in Baton Rouge, not the greatest look for Ole Miss, but make or break game. I'm going to have to go with Ole Miss in this one. I'm going to say this is a game where maybe the defense kind of shows that they got better than the year before and doesn't make it a shootout like it was in Oxford a year ago.
Absolutely, Cam. I also am going to pick Ole Miss because of just how potent the offense is going to be. And, you also have to take into the fact that, you got Trey Harris. He's posting pictures of Tiger Stadium on his Instagram story because they didn't recruit him. You got Logan Diggs, who should be healthy by that time. And, of course, Walker Howard, who transferred from LSU. So there is a little extra motivation there for the guys, of course. And then you do have to consider the LSU's coming off of a bye week. So they're going to be fully rested, ready to go. But again, they may have a couple losses by that point. But regardless, how can we get to, Garrett Nussmeier? How can we get past the offensive line of LSU, which is really talented? And then kind of getting over that hump of last year, how can we stop these elite wide receivers from going berserk? You saw last year, Kyron Lacey, he only had 2 catches, but he had for 51 yards and an insane touchdown catch for those that can remember. They have athletes all over the place. So how can Pete Golding kind of adjust throughout the game and keep the crowd out of it? I think that's a big thing. But at the end of the day, I think our offense is just too dominant over their defense, and hopefully that will prevail when the clock hits 0.
Absolutely. Like you said, the Nussmeier-Lacey connection next year for LSU is probably going to be pretty big for them, not in the Ole Miss game, but down the stretch for them. They did lose Jaden Daniels. They did lose Logan Diggs. They did lose Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. So it's big losses for LSU on the offensive end. I know Nussmeier went off in that bowl game, but he did it with that same offense last year. We're going to see if he can do it with a different offense. Obviously, LSU didn't add a lot on defense. I believe they only added one big-time name on the defensive end. For the defensive line out of Wisconsin in the portal. So not a lot of additions on the defensive side for LSU. We'll have to see what they look like come that time on defense. But like Zach said, I think this offense for Ole Miss will be too much down the stretch. And hopefully this defense shows that they're better than they were a year ago when they head down to Baton Rouge.
I sure hope so, Cam. Because if a defense can hold themselves together for a little bit, I think you can go there and really make a statement. And then that leads you into your bye week, it's perfect.
Absolutely. And then it's going to be a much-needed bye week in Week 8, like Zach said. Heading into Oklahoma in Week 9, they're going to host Oklahoma in the Vaught. Probably going to be one of the biggest games of recent memory for Ole Miss. First time Oklahoma's been in Oxford, and I don't know how long off the top of my head, but seems like with that the baseball championship looming in Oklahoma's past with the Ole Miss win, Oklahoma fans probably going to travel very well to this one. They usually travel very well to other games. So I expect this one to be packed out, middle of the season, maybe a ranked matchup here with Oklahoma. I know they played Texas and Auburn and Tennessee before Ole Miss, so who knows what Oklahoma's record is when they come in to Oxford, but it's going to be a tough matchup for Ole Miss. I'm expecting probably a high-powered offense for Oklahoma behind Jackson Arnold next year. I know he sat behind Dylan Gabriel, but Arnold's got plenty of talent, and I think he's going to show that at Oklahoma next year. We'll have to see what that Oklahoma defense looks like, even though Brent Venables is a defensive guru. It seems like that they just can't put it together on the defensive side of the ball down in Oklahoma. But I believe this will probably be one of those shootout type games like you used to see with Ole Miss Arkansas type thing. I think that's kind of the rivalry Ole Miss and Oklahoma is going to have over recent time in SEC, where they're just going to be battling out on offense. And I believe Ole Miss will probably prevail in this one, but I think it will be a shootout and it will be pretty close probably.
I agree, Cam. It's going to be closer than people think. Ultimately, I think Ole Miss wins. You know, you're home. I love the home field, and obviously our team does too. They rarely lose in the Vaught, but it's the first time these teams are playing since 1999. I don't believe that game was in Oxford, but there's a lot of hype, dude. You know, Oklahoma's coming into the SEC for the first time. You mentioned the baseball national championship. There's going to be a lot at stake. The one thing I love is that Ole Miss gets the bye week before this. And Oklahoma's coming off a home stretch against Texas and South Carolina, two decent programs. Obviously, Texas is elite, but they're going to be exposed throughout those weeks. They're going to be showing weaknesses and a lot of good film to kind of scout up on for Ole Miss while they're resting. And then, again, this is probably the biggest candidate for College Game Day out of our season. You could argue the Georgia week, but I know there are a lot of elite matchups that week as well. But we'll see. It's going to be fun. Powder blue is a theme. Stadium's going to be looking beautiful, and hopefully the boys are ready to go, Cam.
Absolutely. And if Ole Miss can get through the rest of their schedule and get to this game undefeated, obviously this will be a big matchup. Like you said, College Game Day could be there. And if you get through, that's another step to being undefeated heading into Georgia at the next step at locking up an SEC championship spot. Heading into Week 10, on the road at Arkansas. This is a new era for Arkansas. No more KJ Jefferson in town. He went to UCF to join Gus Malzahn over there in Florida. But Arkansas did pick up Boise State transfer Taylon Green, who's pretty dynamic, pretty elite with his running around in the backfield, trying to make some plays. But we'll have to see how Taylon Green adapts to the SEC. Obviously, that'll be later in the season, so we'll have to see where he's at that point in the year. But Sam Pittman was on the hot seat, pretty much late into the offseason for this Arkansas team. So I expect him, if Arkansas is not of caliber, probably to be on the hot seat again at this point. Obviously, Bobby Petrino is now running the offense in Fayetteville again. And this team also lost Rocket Sanders. So this team has lost a lot. This team is not expected to be very powerful in the SEC this year. I believe they were one of the three teams that didn't even have SEC championship odds. So this no disrespect to this Arkansas team, but this is a team that Ole Miss late in the schedule will probably be happy to see. I know it's on the road in Fayetteville, but this is probably one of those years where I feel like Ole Miss kind of separates themselves from Arkansas and kind of wins this game by a couple touchdowns.
That's the hope, Cam, and that's going to be the big question. You know, it's a daytime game, which I like because I don't know what's in the air in Fayetteville at the nighttime, but Ole Miss struggles deeply. But whatever. It's a day game. Again, it's in between Oklahoma and Georgia. You could refer to it as a trap game, but I don't think Arkansas has that type of talent. I think Ole Miss is going to go to Fayetteville and simply dominate from start to finish and hopefully send a message to Georgia, that we're ready. We're not falling into this trap game. We're locked in and we're playing our best ball at the end of the year.
Absolutely. And like you said, heading into the next week in Georgia, you kind of just make sure you don't look ahead. Like we've said in previous games on the schedule, you try to make sure you don't look ahead into these trap games. Ole Miss is getting to that caliber where you have the talent where you're kind of expected to beat some teams. And if you fall into to that mindset that you just think you're going to go in there and beat somebody, it's considered a trap game when you're going into a place like Arkansas and you just think you're going to dominate. But like I said, like you said, that this is a game that they should go in there and handle business going into the next week to face Georgia, which brings us to the biggest matchup of the year, Week 11 in Oxford, the rematch of an embarrassment last year where it woke Kiffin up, it seemed like. It seemed like that was a new Lane Kiffin. After that game, he kind of brought him to the realization that he needed to go get more weight up front, more weight on the defensive line as well as the offensive line, and just kind of make it more fair in the trenches against a team like Alabama, against a team like Georgia, where it seemed like, especially in that Georgia game, where the Ole Miss defensive line had no shot against that Georgia offensive line. And it was hard to watch last year for Ole Miss fans. It was hard to watch for Lane Kiffin. And I think there's a bad taste in these Ole Miss players' mouth that were on that team last year. And this is a game that I believe is going to be very close. But ultimately, I think this is a game that Georgia still kind of runs college football. And I just can't take Ole Miss over Georgia right now, not seeing Ole Miss play yet.
Yeah, I can't, again, Cam, I can't make a decision. I'm referring to it as a toss-up because it's going to be who's playing better football at that time. I think on paper, Kiffin's gotten this team to a point where they're pretty comparable to Georgia. There are several guys, like he said last year, there weren't a lot of guys who could play on that Georgia team. I think this year you could break down every position and find several players who could easily go play for Georgia right now. So the talent's going to be there. It's in Vaught Hemingway, which, again, I love. But Carson Beck simply can't go 18 for 25. He can't throw for 306 yards. And last year, it felt like he wasn't missing a pass. It felt like every time Georgia ran the ball, they're getting 5 or 6 yards per piece. So how can we limit the Georgia offense to keep them off the field and at the same time keep Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, and all those guys on the field and not get stopped so much with the tempo offense? Because when you live and die by tempo, it works really good when it's on, but when it's not on, it's kind of a nightmare. And you allow the other offense to get the ball much more frequently. And that happened last year exactly at Georgia. So there's a lot of things you do have to take into account, but right now I truly cannot pick a winner.
Absolutely. And there was a lot of Ole Miss faces on this team last year that played Georgia, obviously coming back with that bad taste in their mouth. But there's also a lot of new faces that are very important to this Ole Miss team. Are they going to take this game as serious as some of those other guys? Are they going to be able to be as motivated as some of those other guys? I think they should be. It's against probably the top-ranked team in the country when you come in and play them at that time. I know Georgia does play Alabama before that. I know they played Texas before that too, I think. So Georgia could have a loss before that, and this could be a game that decides for a spot for an SEC championship. And especially late in the season where it could be Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, Missouri, Tennessee, all right there within a game apart. And a game like this could decide your fate from a college football playoff spot to an SEC championship spot.
Yeah, exactly, Cam. This could go down as the biggest game in Ole Miss history.
Absolutely. And then obviously the next week, there's 2 bye weeks now, heading into another bye week for the Rebels in week 12. And that'll lead them into Gainesville in week 13. Another game I feel like where it's that Arkansas game where it could be a trap game.
Great.
Obviously, you're playing State the next week where you're probably looking more forward to that one than the Florida game if you're Ole Miss fans and I guess maybe the Ole Miss players if you're looking forward to that Egg Bowl. But this is an Ole Miss team that was ranked in number 3 in the country in 2015 when they went into Gainesville last time. They lost 38-3. So this is a game that you don't need to take lightly. You're going into a very dangerous place in Gainesville. It's going to be packed out with Florida fans, no matter what ranking or what seeding, whatever their team is. They're going to be there, and it's going to be loud in Gainesville, no matter what time of day it is. And I believe this is a talented enough offense to make it competitive with Ole Miss. Not the greatest offense, but Graham Mertz isn't bottom half of the SEC, and these quarterbacks, I believe he was top in the SEC in some of the stats last year. And they also have a couple guys in the receiver room that could cause some problems for this Ole Miss defense. But ultimately, Florida didn't add enough for me to put them over Ole Miss on the defensive end. Obviously, Princely Umamielen will be returning to Gainesville in this matchup, and I expect them to have a big day there. And obviously, Ole Miss, like we said in that Arkansas one, I think this Ole Miss offense is just too much for Florida.
Exactly. I agree, Cam. And the big thing here is just to stay focused throughout the game, because if you're undefeated and you beat Georgia, the swamp is going to be insanely packed out. And you just never know. You never know there. It's a weird spot. Ole Miss hasn't played there in a very long time. It's just things can go wrong, simply put. So you kind of got to stay locked in and just go dominate, go play ball. again, it's just sending a message to the country that, we're locked in and we're not gonna let a game like this slip away from us. You gotta get it, simply put, because it puts you in the position to get, clean up state, gives you plenty of motivation and just good vibes heading into your last rivalry week of the year.
Absolutely. And like you said, it kind of, either way, undefeated or not, even if you lose to Georgia and you come into Florida with one loss, you kind of got to watch that, handle business, and know that you still have a chance to make the college football playoffs if you're Ole Miss. You can't just crumble. You can't crumble after a loss. This is a team now where it's make or break. I mean, we started the season. If you're Ole Miss fans, if you're Ole Miss players, you started the season a top 5 team, and you're expecting to make the college football playoffs. You're not ultimately expecting to beat Georgia and beat Texas and win the SEC championship, but you're expecting to be in the top 12 by the end of the season. And exactly. Beating Florida late in the season is a part of that. Moving into week 14, Jeff Lebby returns to Oxford as the Mississippi State head coach. We want to talk a little bit about that one, Zach. I know I expect Jeff Lebby to bring in a high-powered offense, but it seems like it's going to be a meme type game between Lane Kiffin and Jeff Lebby leading up to that.
Yeah, there's probably you're gonna see some weird stuff on Twitter that week. I mean, Lane, he said some out of pocket stuff about Lebby, if anyone knows what I'm saying. But rivalry games are weird, Cam, and there's gonna be quite a few. I can anticipate some very strange trick plays going on. 2 brilliant offensive minds just going at it. Kiffin and Lebby are very familiar with each other, obviously. But I do like that the game's on Friday. It gives our guys an extra day of rest, which is fantastic because that Thursday turnaround is just way too quick, in my opinion. It's going to be, I believe, a 2:30 kickoff in the Vaught, so it's going to be packed out clearly. And it's a day game. It's interesting, it'll give the guys a new feel. But I think if you stay focused, I don't think this game should be close. But it's Mississippi State, so I would not be surprised if Ole Miss won by 7 or 10 instead of 21, like I believe they should.
Absolutely, and we saw that a year ago where this exactly. Ole Miss team lost. I mean, this Ole Miss team won the game, and it wasn't by as much as people thought it was. It was closer. This was a state team that wasn't as high powered on offense last year. Obviously, they'll be bringing in a better offense with Jeff Lebby, but they have Blake Shapen will probably be under center to start the year. I don't know where they'll be at that point in the season, but Blake Shapen, the Baylor transfer, will probably start the year for State at quarterback. But like you said, this is a game that's probably going to be a touchdown or two. It's going to be a lot closer than most people think. But like we said with the night game thing, like you said with the night game thing, this is a game that's been on Thanksgiving at night for the past couple of years. How is this Ole Miss team going to adjust to that? How is Kiffin going to adjust to that? I know Kiffin probably likes it a little bit more from what we've heard from him in the past on not liking the quick turnaround. But this is going to be a day game on the Friday after Thanksgiving, and probably a chance for more fans to show up than usual. So we'll see how Ole Miss finish the season. And maybe you're finishing a 12-0 season. Maybe you're finishing a 1-loss season. But ultimately, you're probably trying to finish the season here to clinch a college football playoff spot.
And that's all that matters, Cam. You can lose one game. You can lose however many games. Just whatever it takes to get in, dude. Win the games you need to. Get an upset or two against maybe Georgia or LSU. And things are going to take care of themselves. I think this team's talented enough. And I think they have as good of a chance as anybody. And I think they can beat anyone in the country.
Yeah. All in all, I expect this Ole Miss team to have 3 make or break games this year between Oklahoma, LSU, and Georgia. And obviously, if Ole Miss wants to host a playoff game, it'll have to be a 5 through 8 seed come the end of the year in the college football playoff rankings. But ultimately, you're shooting for that for at least the cut of the 12th spot, like you were last year. I think Ole Miss finished the year 11th, so they would have made it last year, a year ago. I'm expecting 4 more teams from the SEC to be in this, maybe even the Big Ten to run a little bit more too. SEC, Big Ten, I'm expecting these teams to run the college football playoffs, and it's a new era for college football. And for Ole Miss fans, you got to be excited about it because it gives you a chance to compete for a championship. And I don't know how many Ole Miss fans are still alive to remember the last time they competed for a national championship. So it's definitely an exciting time in Oxford. I think that's all we got for you guys today. That's all you got, Zach?
All I got, man.
I think that's all we got for you guys today. Next time we talk with you guys, we'll talk a little bit maybe about some basketball, definitely about some baseball. But make sure to tune into the rebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports needs.